We're going to move to the comment section from the audience. And Paul, you want me just to read off the list of who's who and who can speak? And obviously we'd like you to identify who the speaker is, where you live in general, and then try to be brief and to the point. And so you can see there may be a lot of people that want to talk, so we can address the questions to the board or address the questions to the applicant. Who might be going first?
Frances O'Neill.
Frances.
Good evening, thank you very much. My name is Frances O'Neill. I live in Nelsonville, and I'm also the head of the Committee to Save the Cold Springs Cemetery. Our committee believes that the siting of this tower overlooking the beautiful and historic cemetery is a desecration and an insult to this community. The cemetery is the final resting place of Emily and Washington Roebling, builders of the Brooklyn Bridge, Robert Parrott, inventor of the Parrott gun, which helped the Union win the Civil War, Governor Kimball, who established the West Point Foundry, Julia James Butterfield, wife of General Daniel Butterfield, Civil War hero, Medal of Honor recipient, and author of the hymn Taps. Julia Butterfield was a prominent citizen of this community and endowed the local library and hospital. The tower will be sited almost directly overlooking her mausoleum. In addition to the tower itself, the proposal states that 50 trees must be removed, resulting in an ugly scar in the landscape overlooking the cemetery and village. We all realize the need for adequate cell phone and emergency cell coverage in this community. However, we cannot sacrifice our community heritage and landmarks to meet this need. The Village of Nelsonville is willing to work with Homeland Towers to find a more suitable site. I have submitted a list of discrepancies that I found in the application to the zoning board, and a major discrepancy in the application is that it does not mention that the Manitou School is within 1,200 feet of the proposed cell phone tower. There's a lot of controversy over cell phone towers being near schools. Finally, I would like to read a letter from Sean Conway, a member of the Cold Spring District Review Board, who cannot be here tonight. I strongly oppose the construction of this cell tower. Not only will it have an effect on the historic character and viewshed of the neighborhood, but from all accounts is unnecessary. While the Putnam County News Reporter reported this week that Putnam County has the lowest rate of cell service among surveyed markets, from their own account, that is limited to the eastern side of the county. I get perfect service in my home, basement, top of Mount Taurus, and in the middle of the lakes at Fonstock Park. If Carmel and Kent has a problem with their phones, build a tower there. As a member of the Cold Spring Historic District Review Board, we frequently consider applications which seek to insert new technologies into historic space, be it solar panels or advanced building materials, and we oftentimes err on the side of technological progress. This is not one of those cases. The tower is unnecessary. Thank you, and that was from Sean Conway. Okay.
Thank you, and thanks, Sean.
Harold Axelrod.
Good evening, my name is Harold Axelrod. I live on Moffett Road, and there's only one property, I believe, between me and this proposed site. The notion that this tower will go up there and tower over my home, because it's in such close proximity, and destroy the views which brought us to Cold Spring and the bucolic nature of the neighborhood is just appalling. I can't imagine how Moffett Road and Rockledge Road could support that construction. It is not an easily traversed road, not perfectly maintained. It's difficult because of the vertical rise. I think it's just going to result in a huge amount of traffic for those of us who live over there. There may be a need for this tower, but I can't imagine that this is the right location. I would think that they could work with the community and identify it. I happen to be a Verizon Wireless customer. I get perfect service there, not an issue. So I'm not sure why this has to be there. I suspect others who live in that surrounding area have as good a service as I do. So I would urge the board to look really closely at this and see if there isn't another solution. The notion that my grandchildren, that the school down the street, are going to be sitting underneath this tower and see it at all times, it just seems like a horrible result. Other than that, I think Ms. O'Neill covered any of the points I was going to make. Thank you.
Thank you.
Matt Hereford.
Mr. Chairman, Board, I'm Matt Hereford, resident of Nelsonville. 2 years ago, efforts on behalf of the New York State Department of Transportation were undertaken to erect a traffic light in Carmel next to a memorial for victims of the 9/11 attack. Citizens were outraged and protested. The New York Post reported on it, calling the state officials clueless. Our Cold Spring Cemetery is the final resting place for one of those victims of 9/11, as well as Julia Butterfield, Betty Budney, Emily and Washington Roebling. What does it say about us that we would allow a cell phone tower to loom over the graves of these illustrious citizens and a victim of 9/11? Benjamin Franklin was attributed as saying, "Show me your cemeteries and I will tell you what kind of people you have." And I just want to say, what kind of people do we have in Nelsonville? I think good people.
Jeff Rossi.
My name's Jeff Rossi. Thank you so much. I live on Rockledge Road. And I think there's a lot up here that's being presented in a I don't know if it's 100% fair light. So I think there's a lot of conversations that I've heard about, we see six visits down Rockledge through that road now. Well, that's one every 6 weeks. One every 6 weeks compared to what it is now, which is 0. There's no one on this road. It's not a passable road. What it is a small, private, 3-home road that they want to blow through, that they want to create a 110-foot tower with an additional whip antenna on top. And I'm sorry, you can knock down 50 trees and say you're going to maintain the others, but no one in any of their right mind is, whatever tree branch pattern you have, going to confuse a tower with a tree. We need to find a better location than over a historic site adjacent to a school, around all of these residential people who've come together. I have to tell you, I've met more people through this process than I have through anything in my decade in this town. And it's been amazing to see you all come together. And I think I'd love to see the town support the people and its constituents who are opposed to this. And thank you very much.
John Champlin.
Thank you for hearing from us tonight. My name is John Champlin. My parents live at 9 Rockledge Road. They unfortunately physically are unable to be here this evening. Basically their property, it's their property, where the cell phone tower would be, and the cemetery. And kind of as Jeff just mentioned, however much you want to make it look like a tree, there's no 110-foot trees, because I was there today. And I guarantee you there's no 110-foot trees, so it would stick out like a sore thumb. 2 things I just wanted to mention. If it does go through, I mean, one of the things that I, and I'm sure some other people will be looking forward to is, it's definitely going to lower our property values. So I'll be here fighting the assessment, so that'll definitely decrease the tax revenue of Nelsonville, first of all. And second of all, while they do meet the 100-foot setback or whatever it is, I haven't found any report anywhere that says it's safe to live within a 500-foot radius of the cell tower. Maybe if you can point me to one, I'd love to see it. My parents are well within a 500-foot radius of where this tower would be. They're old, yes, but they're not stupid. Okay, so I'm definitely opposed to this, and hopefully you'll follow our comments. Thank you.
Alexander Saunders.
Alexander Saunders, property owner in Nelsonville, 3 Brook Street, and resident of Garrison, environmentalist of some years. I think the proposed location seems stupid to me, with the mountain on one side of it and impinging on historic properties and no access. My property, 3 Brook Street, is zone commercial, easily accessible, has a mature forest of tall trees, and the tower if erected there, would not have to be 110 feet to loom over the mountain. It could just look up and down 301 and south down the river and north and cover the entire village. It's a good site, and its own commercial, and the village could use the taxes. We're paying taxes on the property, but the village could always use more from the tower, and we certainly could use more from the rental. So I'm sorry to be speaking somewhat against the tide here, but on the other hand, the 8 billion people in the world, or whatever the current population is, who all use cell phones, have kind of voted that cell phone systems should be good and should be in existence.
So are you suggesting that your site, you have a site?
I would
an
suggest
alternate site?
that the commercial property at 3 Brook Street be considered as a site. It lies between the cemetery site and the highway garage, and it does look up and down in all directions.
That's right.
And the trees are so mature there that a lower tower would be barely visible from the cemetery, which is immediately to the south of that property.
Okay, thank you.
Kenneth Levine?
Who am I asking this question, to the board or to the people?
Let's
That's
whoever you
all.
want.
Okay, so I say, I'll address the board, I want to see everybody, if I'm going to address people. All right, so the first question I have is,
And sorry, your
why,
name is?
why do we need,
Kenny Levine?
yes, thank you. Why do we need this site location? I don't know. That's something that hasn't been answered. This site location. What benefit will this tower do for the Nelsonville community and residents? What's our stake? What are we gaining by this? Are we gaining any tax revenues? What's in it for the community if it's so important? Well, I don't see anything coming to the community. I don't see anything off it. I don't hear anything off it. Usually, there's a give and take when you're trying to get something that you want. I also don't understand how come, if it's so important, why are they leasing the property rather than acquiring the property and buying the property so that they can run this cell tower? That confuses me also. I mean, if they're gonna make a stake and do something, they should be buying the property. And in that respect, then there would be a conversation of tax revenues and what have you to the village of Nelsonville, which would make more sense. The next question is the impact on homeowners, okay? The impact on homeowners that live in that vicinity. And I'm right next to it too. I did have, I looked at some pictures today, the photographs from Farm Road, Miss Healy's property, and they really didn't show anything. All the pictures I saw make everything look like a cartoon, you know, a characterization of what's there. When you're out there looking at the beauty of the mountains, the trees, and you walk in the properties up there, what will it look like? I don't know. But those pictures definitely don't give us an idea of the impact it might have, okay? I don't know if it'll have impact. It might just fit in perfect, but we don't know that. And then we have to take the chance. So that's another issue that comes up. And then property value. I know that there's some neighbors of mine that have property. What's gonna happen to their property value? What's gonna happen to my property value? I put my whole life into moving to Nelsonville. Okay, I built the house from scratch. I mortgaged myself to the max. I invested in Nelsonville and the community. What's my reward back? Am I gonna have a cell tower in the winter? Yeah, now I'm in the tree line. I can't see past my house because I didn't cut down all that many trees when I built my house. I love where I live, I love looking at the baby deer. What's the impact on Bambi? Today I'm looking in the backyard and there's Bambi, right? The other day I look out and I got a red fox, a mother and a hen coming through the property. And we have eagles and hawks and everything. What's the impact on that? And we have two beautiful young families in the neighborhood with kids. What's the impact on them? We don't know what the cell tower is going to do. I don't know. I'm not a scientist, but I don't know what the impact of a cell tower has on not only humans, but animals and everything else. I didn't have the opportunity to read any of the documents, but I don't have them to take home and read them because it's a whole big package, but I would like one of those from someone so I can read it, the whole thing. I'm not into the laws and everything. I don't know that information, but I do know that it's something that doesn't benefit, or I don't see the benefit coming to the community. And if there was a benefit for the community, that would be very important. And that would be something that you could put a stake on and do a balancing act. There's no balance here. What are we gaining? I got AT&T, I got a signal in my house. I walk up the mountain, I got a signal up the mountain. I walk to the top of Healy's property, I got a signal. Everyone else, Verizon has a signal. I don't understand what the positives are. And I haven't heard anything positive yet, sitting here listening to everything that went on. So that's my concern. Thank you.
Thank you.
Richard Galala.
Hi, I'm Richard Valala. I live at 16 Rockledge Road, and I got a question. What's the monetary benefit to Doug Logan with this? What is the price that he's gonna get from this per year? How is that? You're paying him?
That's not required by the code or by law. We're not at liberty to get
Apparently
into those
that's
types of
disclosure.
financial
Okay,
decisions.
but we've looked into it, and it's quite a bit of money because he's getting rent from each one of you annually. So my point is why should he benefit and not find a place where the town's going to benefit? Like I agree with you, if someone's going to benefit, I've got AT&T, and I've got great service. We don't need. If Kent has a problem, put it over there. But if the town is not going, if they find a place in town that can monetarily benefit from it, why should one person stand to benefit from it? Another thing, I have 3 kids. I moved to Cold Spring precisely to get away from things like that. I mean, I moved because of the environment, because I have foxes running in my backyard, because I have deer. I can show you a picture of that. I have 12 turkeys and a deer running through our backyard. That's why I moved here. What is the microwave going to do to my kids, to the animal life here as well? The other thing, probably most important, is that having owned or bought this property, I looked into thoroughly the rights of having that access road and running through my property. It's a right of way, and that's all it is. It's not an easement. I looked into it thoroughly. I had my lawyers looked at it. That property only has the ability to come in and out through my property, in egress and egress. It doesn't have right to run power lines through my property. Having kids, I looked into it thoroughly. I don't not to run underlying power lines, overlying power lines. I'm so opposed to it for so many reasons. For that, my kids, I moved here precisely for that. And again, I've looked in my deed. I got a new copy of it. There's no terminology that says easement. It only says right of way. And if you look up the law, and I looked up it thoroughly, and my lawyers looked at it before I bought the property, it only gives them the right to come in and out, not to run power lines, not to run water lines, not to put up cell towers next to me through power lines. So it's very upsetting, obviously, to me, having 3 kids that are very young. Go to Haldane.
Eliza Nagel.
My name is Eliza Noggle. I live on Healy, or I will live on Healy very shortly. We're building there. I object strongly to the cell tower for several reasons. One, because of the location on historic cemetery, and I think you spoke beautifully to that. I mean, it's unbelievable to me that you'd put a 110-foot cell tower on a historic cemetery. Secondarily, the health concerns. There are so many studies showing increased cancer rates around cell tower locations. I have young children. People who've spoken here tonight have young children. You know, we've moved to Nelsonville to raise our children and not to be under these horrible, large, unknown, cancer-causing cell towers. The need for a tower. I have AT&T. I have no glitches in service until I go over to, I think, Wappingers. I have one point where I lose service on my way to work. There's no problem with our cell service. And I've seen these fake trees. I mean, everybody's seen these fake trees, the branches that somebody thought might look like a real branch. It's a 110-foot fake tree in our beautiful town. Finally, I think there's probably a lot of money to be made in this, but I think you're underestimating the people of this village, and I think you're underestimating their love of the beauty, the safety, and the history of their community. And I think you have a long battle in front of you, and I urge you to reconsider.
Right on. Okay, last, Maria Stein Morrison.
Hi, my name is Maria Stein-Marison. I am the director of the Manitou School. I'm a resident of Garrison, but I spend most of my time just down the road from where the proposed cell tower will be. And one thing that I found troubling was that in the application, it stated that they were within 1,500 feet, was it, of a historic site, which would be our school property, which is housed in the former Plumbush Inn, but that it was not within 1,500 feet of a school. Now, we are a school, we have been there now for a few years, so I just want to note that the lack of due diligence there, that not only is there a school, but there is a school that serves mostly young children. And while there is a lot of controversy on whether there are health effects of having cell phone towers and how close you need to be, it is a fact that young brains are much more deeply affected by this kind of exposure than adult brains. And we have a school where we have a large number of 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds coming every day that will be exposed to this kind of radiation. And so I also strongly urge you to reconsider the location for all the reasons that have already been stated, but in addition, for the safety of the children that attend Manitou School.
That's it? No more comments or questions from the audience? One more, sorry, sir.
My name is Thomas Robertson. I sit on the board of Village of Nelsonville. Frankly, Mr. Chairman, I'm offended, really offended to this outfit. They came and deposited a bunch of boxes on our clerk's desk, fully prepared to go forward. Never once did they come to us and seek advice. Are there other locations in Nelsonville? Certainly. The village owns property. There's property behind the Masonic Lodge. We control 101 acres, which, talking with open space, we met with there's a lot of other locations. What they're doing to the people who live there is sacrilegious. And if anybody knows me, this is going to be a fight. I hope they reconsider. Thank you.
We have one more.
Yeah, I think there were a couple of hands.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, would you like to say?
If there's still comments.
Just a few more comments. So we're gonna, apparently.
I'm a resident of Cold Spring. Hi, thank you, everybody. A clarifying question, the tower that was at Butterfield was an AT&T tower. How tall was it?
It was on the rooftop, it wasn't a tower.
So it was an antenna?
It was antennas on the rooftop.
Can that be revisited for a shared antenna for Verizon and AT&T at the new Butterfield site?
I don't know what the leasing status was, because that was through AT&T, but we can certainly look at
Okay, and 110.
But there's a representative from AT&T here now, isn't there?
that. Yes.
Yeah, I
So
mean, we were,
why
the
doesn't he
lease,
speak
the
to it?
lease was completed, and we were ejected from the site.
So you had to
that's- So
reapply.
they didn't,
It hasn't-
they didn't,
Well, it
AT&T would
doesn't
much
work.
rather continue there, but they had no interest.
They got rejected.
For whatever their future plans are for the facility. A lot of times these facilities are in the way of other development that they need to do with the projects, and they don't want that to get in the way. So the lease was terminated.
And 110 feet is what, a 10-story building? 11-story
Eleven,
building?
eleven.
11-story building?
Well, it's not a building, it's a tower.
For scale, I'm suggesting, because just moving up from the city 2 years ago, again, trying to get away from, it's already starting to look like Queens, forgive me, with everybody parking on the street, and now we're gonna have this kind of looming tree, sort of simulation of a tree.
Yeah, it's
You know,
about
so
an
it's a
about
simulation
an
of a
8-story
wooded
building.
area.
It's about an
So-
8-story building.
Can we
decorate it during the holiday?
I don't want to come across, I mean, because it can be easy to be anti-progress, anti-technology, which is also completely backward. I mean, that's not a smart way to be either, but I do think that a different site over a cemetery near the school, in the area that is, I agree, for the people that live there, I'm over there a lot, walking my dog, and I honestly cannot picture this thing. And when they did do the Butterfield site, they redid it, I live close to that, which was a fine process, that was, had its own issues, but the displacement of the deer, when they were doing that project, they were everywhere. It was like somebody released them from a zoo, I mean, it was just everywhere, and so it was more deer in the street on 9D, and it was just very compelling to see the offset of that, and it wasn't prepared, so thank you so much, and good luck, Nelsonville.
Sorry?
Gordon Casey.
Oh, Gordon, you wanna
Well,
speak to- We have 3 more? Anybody else after that?
Can we just have maybe people sign the list?
You might as well sign in when you speak, just for the record. 3 more, it looks like? Want to sign in?
Would you like to sign?
Yeah, come in and sign in.
Sign.
So we have a record who's speaking. And then it looks like we're done with public comment.
My name's George Eisenbach. I live on Billings Way, so no doubt I'll be able to see this thing when and if. But all this conversation, I haven't heard one true explanation, or at least one that I can understand, as to why we're making this journey. Why is this tower being built at all? Everyone seems to have decent cell phone service.
Yes.
Right? I'm not speaking for everybody, but it just seems that way. Who benefits? If this tower was never built, what would go wrong? I mean, what would go wrong in Nelsonville? What would go wrong on this half of Putnam County? So, am I deaf, or am I just not hearing me? But that's a question.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if you want back and forth, we're happy to respond to comments.
We could, or you could, you certainly have a lot of questions that you could come back and answer at a later date, and if you don't want to address them right at this particular time, or if you prefer to, we certainly would welcome those responses.
Sure.
On who benefits seems to be the overriding question from the audience. Benefit, I mean, obviously, the property owner is going to benefit, but is there any benefit to the village besides better cell phone?
So I think just at the outset, I think.
Well, because my question was related to that.
go ahead.
The only reason, so I mean, my reading of the report is that there was a technological approach to determining that there is a gap in service. And I would assume that if people had service and then lost it, there would also be some record of like an increased number of complaints. And so I was curious if there was if there've been consumer or customer reports about a gap in service in addition to what I read as a technological a
Sure.
technology-based assessment.
So,
for the gap.
to put things in perspective, I don't want to get too legal, but I think it does beg the answer based on the questions. At the outset, I think there were some assumptions made about lease revenue and co-location. Those assumptions without basis. I'll say that for the record. Secondly, what federal law says, pursuant to the Telecommunications Act of 1996, is that a local municipality, among other things, may not prohibit service. And what the standard that the courts have fashioned over the years is that an applicant that comes in has to show a significant gap in coverage and also whether the facility is the least intrusive means of serving that gap. There are also other limitations. For example, if there is a zoning code, which is the case here, you cannot deny the application unless you have substantial evidence in the record. You also can't make a decision based on radio frequency exposure, provided the facility meets the FCC guidelines, which it does. You also cannot unreasonably discriminate amongst different carriers. But going back to the prohibition issue, the way the courts have looked at the issue, they've looked at it as a technological basis. So if you look at the case law, it's based on showing by data, showing through these types of analyses that were submitted, whether there is a gap in service. And that's what we believe we've submitted. Then the case law also goes on to say whether it's the least intrusive means is really an analysis based on what the zoning code says. So again, we've offered and we've said that if you have a site that you believe is less intrusive than this one, we're certainly willing to take a look at it. We did look at the DPW property purely from a leasing standpoint. We did not review it from a technological standpoint. If you believed it was less intrusive, we'd be willing to go back to the town board and see if they are willing to actually lease it to us, and then we can perform that analysis. Statements that we did not come to the village looking, seeking advice, that's not correct. We did meet with the village planning board chairman at the time back on February 3rd, 2016, specifically for that reason. We asked for feedback on alternative sites, and we weren't provided anything. Now, I don't think that matters one way or another, but I just do want to clarify the record that we did not come to this application, as you can tell by the materials that we submitted, on a hodgepodge or willy-nilly basis. We did a tremendous amount of due diligence. We did a tremendous amount of effort in preparing the materials pursuant to your code, and nevertheless, we're still willing to go through the process. If you have alternatives you want us to look at, we're happy to do that due diligence. We're not saying no to any particular alternative, whether it meets the code or doesn't meet the code, but we want to make sure it's done in a reasonable fashion, and more importantly, or in addition, in a reasonable period of time. And the FCC has said, and Congress has said, that applications such as this have to be processed without unreasonable delay. And the rule of law now is within 150 days of filing. So we're happy to work with you on that process. We're happy to go through the steps. We're happy to look at different alternatives. We're happy to discuss the site plan. We are open to your comments. We are open to suggested alternatives, and we will do our part in that process. Thank you.
Can I ask one quick clarifying
Yes,
question?
sure.
I think to George's question, what's service today and what would service be a year from now if this is not built? What is lost?
So the service,
What's the difference from status quo to future state if it's not built?
So there's two things. There's a significant gap in service right now, as documented by the report from Mr. Panessa, and that's based on not only a need now, but the need for wireless service continues to escalate in an avalanche fashion. Okay, it used to simply be phone calls. Now it's data. It's data driven with respect to use of the internet, use of business communications. Even phone calls today are produced over a data network, and that's very important to understand that the capacity of the systems
I understand your argument. I didn't mean to interrupt.
But, and there's a second point to it though, and I referenced this earlier. There was a study done regarding emergency communications in this part of the county, and it was shown to be deficient. And this proposal, we're willing to make it available for the county to be able to use it in the future for their emergency services, and we're willing to do that as an additional benefit to the area. Thank you.
Okay. We appreciate your cooperation. It sounds like there's maybe some additional sites we should look at. In the meantime, we have a couple more people that want to speak.
Gordon
And-
Casement?
Yeah, Gordon Casement. I'm a resident on Moffett Road. I'm at the bottom of Moffett Road, down below Rockledge up there. I have Verizon service. I don't have problems, don't have drop calls, but I understand progress continues. There is more need for data. By profession, I'm a commercial real estate appraiser, very familiar with cell towers, cell properties, and evaluations. There is a significant, as Richard mentioned, income stream from these, to the tune maybe of, $5,000 to $10,000 a month to the property owner. I would like to propose to the board, to the zoning board, planning board, to consider the location that gives back to the community instead of a single property owner, as Richard mentioned. Where I work, I'm the town appraiser in the town of Rye. You'll see all over Westchester. You don't see a lot of tall towers in the urban areas, White Plains, Rye, whatever. They put them on tall buildings. They kind of blend them in with tall buildings, towers, hospitals,
Sure.
what have you. They were on the hospital, and by looking at the plans, this past week, I believe the elevation was about 190, was it, feet on the hospital? Anybody confirm that approximately?
I'd
Okay,
have to look, yeah.
that's what I recall, about 190 feet elevation. This building here well surpasses where the height elevation that it was at the hospital. You can put it on this building, town of Villagetown, garners the income for the whole community. If not, Church on the Hill, across the street, it would go to a nonprofit church, forever help them be a feasible operation as a nonprofit religious organization. So I propose, and if they fall within a zoning area, zoning district that doesn't allow it, I would urge a reconsideration of a spot zoning or a consideration of a utility within being located on a building.
Yeah, there does seem to be concern about the health of why these antennas, to put them on a building, would they not be detrimental to supposed health concerns?
I know they're on the hospital.
Yeah, they
in
were.
the
So
town.
it's kind of odd.
United
I'm
Hospital
just saying, the
is one of
audience,
those,
some
they are
audience
hospitals.
members have expressed that these antennas are a health
Sure.
issue, so, I mean, having it out in the middle of the field seems to be a better place, just thinking out loud, than on a building. Apparently, there weren't enough high buildings around here, but be it as it may,
Yeah.
the point that the village should get the money, and I don't think anybody's opposed to that, so.
Right.
But again, whoever's getting the money, it's their business too, so we've got to go back and forth and look.
Just further consideration.
Yeah, thank you.
My name is Bevan Harris. I'm a neighbor of Gordon's. I live on Moffett Road. I'm in kind of the southwest corner of where the tower will go up. I'm concerned. I won't go into full detail. We all understand our health concerns about it. I'm concerned about irrigation and drainage from that site. I'm concerned about the fact that it's about a 4,000 square foot plot, concrete pad that's got to go in. Not to mention a generator that's going to be on, and a building, a structure. So I don't know if that was shared tonight. I came in a little bit late. I do have questions about who creates the study that was done to evaluate the fact that we have diminishing cell service. I'm a sales rep. I cover Westchester, South, out to Long Island, 5 boroughs. I can tell you, being on the phone all day, where I'm short of coverage, and I can tell you it's not here.
Right.
All right? And the other question I have is, I don't know if it was mentioned, but do you guys know, are you aware of their intent to put another tower on Vineyard Road? Okay, so that was discussed tonight?
No.
Okay,
It's
so.
it's in the application package.
Oh, that's good to know. That's great. So so why do we have that many towers that need to go in?
Follow the money.
I can go to City Hall and I need a tower there because I drop calls by City Hall in Manhattan, okay? And I have no problem here, and we need another tower in a residential community. Can we put one next to your home?
Mr. Chairman, yeah. I'm going to object. I'm not going to stand here and be verbally assaulted or
Correct.
attacked like that. So I don't think that's appropriate. And what I would ask for tonight is that the board schedule a public hearing. And obviously, the meeting's been open to the public the whole night, so given the 150-day limitation, we'd ask for a formal public hearing and be able to get this on the record. Thank you.
Right, we have one more, to the gentleman's point. They're representing the company. You may speak.
Okay, thanks.
It's nothing personal.
My name is Mary Ann Sullivan. I live in Garrison, New York. I am the mother of 2 children who attend the Manitou School, and I just wanted to reiterate Director Steinmarison's concerns about the siting of a cell tower within 1,200 feet of the Manitou School. So I just want to support the concern, and then I have a related concern about the historic character of the graveyard and the area, and the natural beauty of the area. And so for those reasons, I'd like to ask the board to reconsider the siting of the proposed tower.
Thank you.
Dennis Meekins?
My name is Dennis Meekins. I live on Haley Road. I support all the comments that were made by everybody, environmentally, safety-wise. We all need cell service. But I still haven't heard. I have 2 questions, or maybe 1 question, 1 comment. 1 question, 2 comments. Sorry. Were any of the neighboring jurisdictions part of the alternative sites? Because it sounded like us and the highway department. So was Cold Spring or Phillipstown sites included?
Yeah, so if I can respond to that, because I think it's a good question. Going back to the Vineyard Road application, both Homeland Towers and Verizon Wireless have that proposal in the town of Phillipstown. So we've looked at that area. We've looked at the overall area of coverage. AT&T has a slightly different issue in that they lost Butterfield and we're trying to replace the coverage in this particular area. So Homeland Towers has looked the entire area, the 2 and the 10-mile radius as far as existing structures, existing tall structures, and also co-location opportunities. So yes, the answer is we've looked at the entire area as far as co-location and existing structures. Falling back from that we focused on an area that would provide the coverage to cover this part of the service gap. The Vineyard Road application is to connect with that on Route 301, as I mentioned before, and that connection area is around Jaycox. So if you look at the maps, you can see where those areas are and the need for the coverage in and around Nelsonville. This site specifically required to cover Nelsonville, but it also does cover obviously Cold Spring because they're neighbors and it's in the same type of area, and parts of obviously Phillipstown around the outer edges.
Right.
So we're looking for a site, and obviously we're looking to cover the village. Just 2 other points of clarification. We're not proposing a 4,000 square foot concrete pad. It's a 3,250 square foot compound that's gravel. That's gravel covered. It's not a concrete pad. As far as erosion and sediment control, that's all detailed on the plans. So
The planning board will take a look
yeah,
at
I
it.
just read that comment and just wanted to set the record straight that was not right. And there's also not a school setback. There's not a school setback in your code. There's not a state law school setback. There's not a school setback, under federal law. So there is no school setback. I just want to make that clear.
Okay, good to
Well,
clarify.
I'd like to take back my time. I'd like to take back my time.
Yeah.
I didn't ask all those
Can
questions,
speak right
that was
after
great
it.
information, but maybe, where is the gap in coverage then related to customers? Because having negotiated probably 24 site locations for a large nonprofit on Long Island in the 90s, and obviously technology's changed, but the location issue hasn't. And we always wish, we're kind of, that question, who's gonna benefit? People have been asking, I haven't heard a straight answer, what customers are gonna receive coverage?
Both Verizon and AT&T, and if
In what locations?
you look at the maps, it's clearly delineated in the maps, but it covers, I would say, all of Nelsonville, if not every bit of Nelsonville.
But if we already have coverage, who's it picking up that didn't have coverage in Nelsonville?
Look, I'm saying that from a technical standpoint, there's a gap in service, and that's detailed in the RFP. If some folks say they have service, I can also tell you that there was a study on emergency service communications in this area, wireless service, and it was found to be deficient. So I think between those 2 different reports, I think there's been a need. If no one's familiar with that report, we can certainly submit it to them.
And that's a valuable report, but is there no breakdown by zip code then, or by town of where those gaps are?
It's actually in the report by way of a map, and it shows where the reliable service is and where it's at. And it includes all of Nelson.
We usually had to put our towers for the diocese in the town that was most positively impacted.
Well, and that's exactly the case here.
Nelsonville is the most positively affected. Everybody in this room, we're probably about 20% of the village. We all have coverage, so I would think the 80% who don't, if they don't, will have whatever percent, they would be here fighting for the town. So I'm confused where our gap is, quite frankly.
I think we'll rest on the report that's been
Right.
submitted. I don't
We
think
have a
it's
tremendous amount of information nobody else has.
I trust you, William, but.
Yeah. It's not that it's, and we are not the experts in this, that's why we are gonna hire the third-party expert to look at this information, and we can address point by point everyone's questions in the audience, you know, and rebut them or support them, or however it goes, just looking for the facts, and the facts, you know.
I think we're looking for the facts too, though.
Yeah, exactly, so
That's why
everybody.
we're all here.
Yeah, so everybody's just looking.
Absent that, I wanna put it on Sandy's property.
Yeah. So I mean, and like we can see, is there a 4,000 square foot pad on the drawings? If there is, there is. If there is, there isn't. It's right here on the drawing. So we'll look at that and we'll find out.
3250.
It's not
In
a
any
concrete
case.
pad.
Steve, you wanna make a quick?
It's not a concrete.
I just wanted to say, I'm Steve Moreno, I'm the chairman of the planning board,
Yes, sir.
and starting next week, we will be starting the site plan process.
Right. So we don't wanna get into that.
And there's a meeting next week, is it Wednesday night?
It's September 7th?
September 7th, which is Thursday night. I don't know if we'll be meeting here or if we'll be meeting at Village Hall. That will start the process for site plan.
Right.
I was just gonna inquire of Pauline, I know there was a lot of information submitted. The reports that the gentleman has been referring to, we've seen it,
Yeah.
but the public hasn't seen it. I don't know if, is it possible to get it on the village's website?
Well,
Download as PDFs so that people can open them and,
probably can't get some of the drawing, you know, the.
well, I think they could probably get you PDF, digital
I
files
think
of
we
all that
provided,
stuff.
I think we provided the digital file.
No, I don't.
Prepared the report, nobody has answered that yet.
Well, the reports have been prepared by their consultants. We will be hiring consultants to review their report.
Right.
And that's gonna be part of the process as this plays out. But if we can get some of this stuff on the village's website, there are maps, there are a lot of the stuff that the gentleman was speaking about, whether we agree with it, disagree with it, find it valid or not, they are in the reports, and you can at least look at maps, see where the coverage gaps are that they're talking about. So everybody knows what's going on. There's a whole package on the visual impacts with photographs before and after. And I think that would help everybody if they could see that before the next meetings.
And Mr. Chairman, I think it's an excellent point. We'll get Pauline a disc with a PDF of those documents.
Right, and you can see what we're referring to, what the gentlemen are referring to, and it's not that hard of a reading. I mean, it's a lot of information, but it addresses a lot of the questions that you're speaking to, and it's done by professionals, engineers, and you can make your own judgment on the quality of the work. That's a great idea.
What's the trigger on the window to start? Somebody mentioned 150 days?
I would, that the day of the application.
The day the application's filed.
Right, and what the gentleman was talking about, there's a lot of rules that, from the FCC that we're not 100% understand, but it's a federal government issue too in communications, so you can advise us on that. We have our own village attorney, and,
What was the date that it was filed?
we have that. So there is a window, there's a sunset on it, so.
So July 18th was the beginning of that 150-day clock from initial read.
All right, but anyway, any more questions? I think one more, and that's it.
I have a
Okay?
quick question, yes, we were talking about how the tower looks, but you had also mentioned there are generators. And so one question I have is what the decibel output of the
I believe it's in the
area
report.
is. What is it?
We'll provide that information. I don't have an objection.
Okay.
I actually didn't see it in the report. I understood it to be a requirement of the report, but I didn't see it in there.
Okay.
What, generators in there?
But the decibel
acoustical,
level, the decibel level is
okay.
required,
All right.
but I did not see that in there.
Any air quality impacts from the generators, would that be addressed in the report?
There's an environmental assessment form that's been submitted also, which it'll be online. You guys take a look at it. It's pretty straightforward, and we are gonna talk about that probably at our next meeting. Talking about our next meeting, we are going to, sir, do you have another, you want?
No, I just wanted to.
Yeah. We would like to, are we gonna do the public hearing next, or no? We're gonna have one more, we'd like to, for you guys to address the questions that the audience and both the board, and we'll have another session, talk about the environmental impact statement. If you need to bring your expert, please do. And we'll get through that, and then we'll have our public hearing. That makes sense. Now, we also, it might be a good idea to talk to the mayor and the trustee of Nelsonville. I believe there may be some alternate sites that we have here in the town that we haven't even talked about.
Yeah,
Thomas, it sounds like you had I know Thomas is a trustee, Bill O'Neill is the mayor, there's another trustee, the new trustee is also here.
He just left.
He just left,
He
okay.
had to leave.
So you guys might wanna engage the board and the mayor, and we suggested maybe other sites, which
There's
could be
several there.
terrific compromise.
And that's why I was offended, because I think the first duty was to come to the village and tell us what they proposed to do.
Okay, so there we go.
And again, the so-called approach to the village, to the town, didn't seem very strong.
All right, so here we are, and we probably be, I mean, we're the zoning board of appeals, we're gonna talk to the planning board, let's talk to the mayor and the trustees. If there is an alternate, we can give you a viable alternative. It sounds like some audience members may have one,
Yeah,
so
and
let's
I
look
think
at
it's,
it.
I think it's very important, though, for the
Yeah.
board to give feedback. You know, we heard about Mr. Saunders' property. I don't know what the board, you know, obviously not asking you for a decision tonight,
No.
because we're obviously, you're not asking us for a decision tonight. But somewhere along the process, you know, you probably know that, you know, the viability of that property better than even we do at this stage. And if at some point, you know, by the next meeting, if you said to us, that's not a good location, that would be very helpful feedback as well.
And can I surface one or two more things before we wrap?
Yeah.
And obviously people can leave whenever they need to, but for the village lawyer, one of the questions that I'd like to understand is when does that 150-day start? From my read of this, it seems that the application is incomplete. It seems that there's a number of things that are very clearly required. So starting that shot clock on July 17th or 18th, whatever the date is there, seems unreasonable to me. It seems that it should begin once the application is submitted and complete.
Sure.
So that's just that was a comment to our village.
Sure, and I can just opine on that, and you'll obviously get advice from council. It's deemed complete unless there is a written notice of incompleteness within the first 30 days, which there was not. So therefore, the shot clock runs. Now, and that's under federal law, and if your council would like, I can certainly send them the FCC report and order and the rules on that. But there is an opportunity.
I'm sorry, just in the sake of everyone's time, I just
Sure.
want to move through those things. I understand
Fine.
your point, and we'll consult with him. One of the things that I still don't fully understand is the documentation of all of the communications you've had with others in nearby sites. I'd like to understand those communications. I'd like to understand what those conversations have looked like. I'd like to understand what happened at Butterfield. I'd like to understand the conversations with the trustee, or excuse me, the supervisor in Phillipstown. I'd like to understand what type of due diligence you've been doing in order to find these other sites, and that's not in the packet. I don't believe that makes the packet complete, but that's a separate question.
I believe it is in the alternative site analysis, specifically as far as the emails
Copies of the
back and forth.
communication?
But we can certainly,
We'll take a look at it, but we'd
we
like
can
to
certainly
see.
provide the communications.
And then also there's a number of inconsistencies throughout in terms of the height of it. One of them was mentioned earlier. In terms of the historic review, the FAA noted a different height still. There's aspects of this application that talk about 4 attachments and then others 5. You were saying at least 2 more. There's just a number of inconsistencies.
So they're not
across
inconsistent.
that.
I can explain each and every one of them to you if you'd like.
We don't need to use everyone's time, but I'm sure you can. So that's just something next time when we come back together, I'd just like to make sure that we have a clear understanding. And then I would like, if you could in brief, describe the construction process. My understanding from your application is that it's from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. It could take 2 to 3 months, that there would be underground work. Can you briefly now describe that a little bit? It sounds like that's one of the particular concerns of the neighbors on Rockledge Road. Can you describe the construction process and what that looks like, particularly the underground aspects?
Sure. You know, actually, I'd like to introduce Mr. Vicente, who's the president of the company, has extensive experience in this, and he can give you an overview of the construction process, because it's not a 2 to 3 month process, although it does take 2 to 3 months to complete.
So the way the construction process works is, in total, it takes 2 to 3 months, but there's only certain activity that's significant on the property. The clearing of the property and the area, the grading, and then the foundation work for the tower. So first, they'll have the clearing happening and the grading, so that's a substantial piece of construction. Then we will dig the hole and set the foundation. That's probably one of the most significant parts of the construction, and that lasts generally 2 days. With inspections, it could last 3 or 4 days, but the actual physical activity is 2 days. From there, the only other substantial construction is going to be setting the actual tower, which takes, on a monopine, the tower goes up in 1 day, and then it could take several days to put the branches up and equip. And then the final stage would be to put the cabinets or shelters down and then close the compound. So although the time frame we say 2 to 3 months, out of that 2 to 3 months, you're probably looking at about 3 weeks of real construction.
And can you describe the underground process?
When we do the clearing and grading, we will dig the conduits for the utilities. Once we have that utility design, obviously you folks need to approve it, the planning board, and then get a building permit, and then we also have to have the utility company's design and their approval. So there's a lot of approvals for those utilities, and that is usually done at the same time of clearing and grading, and we'll dig the utility trenches at that time.
And how deeply do you dig?
It depends, but generally 3 to 4 feet.
And if you don't have if it's not a right of way that you're able to dig under?
We do have a right of way. We did submit copies of those documents, and we do have the authority.
So the depth of the conduits is controlled by your code to some degree, New York State Building Code, and also the utility company.
Excuse me, since they're gonna be digging through my property, where are they gonna be digging through my property?
We did show it on the plans.
Okay,
It's
but
it's
you don't
in the
have a
right of way.
right to. You have a right of way, you don't have a.
I think we disagree on that, but it is shown, the location is shown on the
There's no easement on my
plan.
deed, says right of way, ingress and egress.
Submitted that documentation, genuinely?
It has been submitted.
His deed documentation.
Yeah, the
is
deed
with that.
documentation has been submitted.
With the words.
Correct.
Easement or right of way?
It's irrelevant what the words are. The fact is we have the
Deed
right.
says right of way,
we
it
have-
all says
we have the
right of way.
No,
It
no,
doesn't say easement.
guys, we're not gonna talk about this tonight because it's nothing that we can decide. It's a legal question and a deed question.
That's correct.
There's no reason to discuss it. Now, we're gonna end comments from the audience and move on, but, Chris,
I'm good for now, yeah.
thank you for that description of the construction.
Thank you.
Now what, next steps? We need to answer the questions from both the board and from the audience. I think we can do that at the next meeting.
Sure.
We should talk about the environmental impact statement. When will our third-party engineer have comments? Not that we have to engage them. What's a reasonable time to expect comments back from them to the completeness of this application? Not to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I would anticipate it would take a
No.
month. I presume you're gonna meet sometime in October, and by that meeting date, once established, the RF engineer should have sufficient time to respond.
Around 30 days to meet,
I would anticipate. In the interim, if you wish, you could always initiate a site visit if that's the board's prerogative to understand site
I
specific.
think that's, you had suggested that, sir. I think we
Happy
should
to
pick
motion on
probably a
that.
weekend, and we'll get back to you on that. We'll go over to the
Site
site,
visit.
which makes sense, it's an important issue. And, so we have to schedule a site visit, we need to schedule the next meeting. And, we need to look at the calendar, Pauline, maybe we could let everybody know, like we usually do, find an open date for everybody that's convenient, within about 30 days or,
30 days.
yeah.
So you'll communicate that date back to us?
Yes, calendar days,
Thank you.
yes. And then we'll address those, we may address a couple other issues, and we'll let you know what they were.
You intend to circulate your intent to be lead agency as far as the secret process?
That's a good point.
We're gonna have to,
Which
we're
planning
gonna have
board or is it
to,
us?
we're gonna have to have a meeting on seeker, where there's gonna have to be notices sent out to the other involved
Okay.
agencies.
Good
That
point.
absolutely is gonna have to get done, and soon. and you're not gonna have a public hearing until after you've gone through seeker. So,
Right.
so you have a way to go to get to the public hearing, but you do have to get started with
Okay.
seeker,
All right.
designating lead agency and so forth. You probably, I mean, I think you can't really do a seeker review until the professionals are on board and have a chance to look at this stuff. But after that, you're gonna have to, make a determination of significance and so forth. You're gonna have to distribute the notice of lead agency. They have 30 days on that, so.
So it's 60 days?
Yeah, I think you should schedule, I don't know if you're in a position to make a determination about the professional this evening, but if you can't, then I would suggest that you have a meeting in about a week or so to hire the professionals, make arrangements with the professionals to review the, plans and make comments to the board, then, and we're advised 30 days is about what you need for that.
Right.
Then I think you have to schedule your next meeting around that, that circumstance to, then start addressing seeker.
Yes, that sounds like a plan. So I think we could pick someone to hire tonight, before we go. And, there's two gentlemen that are both highly qualified, so we'll do that after we, conclude the meeting. Anything else, sir?
I have nothing, but thank you for your time this evening.
Yeah, thank you, everybody, for coming. We're gonna close the meeting, and, we'll follow up, as we just discussed.
Thank you.